Okay, so good day class. So I'll be your I'm architect Adolf Vincent Vigor. So I finished my bachelor's degree in architecture here at this university. Then I finished my postgrad studies in project management with a specialization in infrastructure and construction at the University of Liverpool. So currently I'm studying my Doctor of Technology Education at in this institution as well. So I am a licensed architect, I'm a licensed real estate broker, and I'm a licensed real estate appraiser, and I'm also a chartered architect of the Royal Institute of British Architects in the United Kingdom. Okay, so I have already around, not so sure if it's 12 to 13 years or 12 to 14 years experience in architecture and construction. So I worked before overseas for half a decade before going back here in the Philippines to teach and open up my own firm. So in our design subject, we're going to have some lectures, so some consultations. And then, but I'm going to it will be more output based. Okay? And I'm going to give you a also to defend your designs. Okay, so we'll be able to train you well to analyze spaces and design uh, building what you have encountered in design one. Okay, so let's start our lecture by uh, defining what is a building program. Okay, so these things are important, especially when you are dissecting something. When you are dissecting uh, a design problem, so you have to understand these things. So the first step to any design project would be to identify the building program. A program is an architectural term for what type of building is it and what goes into the building. Okay, so I think you're actually aware that there are different types. So the program is the use and general outline of spaces. If you're going to design an apartment building, the program may be a residential building with at least 50 units. For example, if designing a school, you would want to know the age group. Of course, when you design a school, the considerations are different if you have college students, senior high, junior high, and elementary school students. So we should know how many students they plan to accommodate, how many classrooms, and types of special rooms that they want, which is the auditorium, gymnasium, etc. So in the real practice class, uh, this is to do some research and interview the client as well as to what they want and what they need in their project. So everything that goes into a building is called is the first key point to identify before beginning a building design. So you can't design a building without knowing what it will be used for and how it should be used. So if you wanted me to design a building for you and I could only ask one question, what is the building program? So in architecture class, this is the stage. In architecture design, this is the stage where the space programming. I think in your design one, you were taught to do um, your bubble diagram, preliminary plans. Okay, these things are important because it allows you to see the interrelationships of the different spaces. Okay, so when you are still studying architecture class, the spaces are already given, so you know what you're going to do. But sometimes in the actual practice, you may have to interview your client and you may have to do a lot of research as well, okay, to to design a specific building or structure. Let's go into site analysis. So the second step in gathering or beginning an architectural design is to identify the site. The site for a new building is extremely critical and will greatly affect the design. Okay, through class, because you should always remember when you design something that even if it has, let's say, for example, if you design a residential building and you're going to build it across several sites, it's going to be slightly different because each site would have different considerations. It would have different slopes. It would have different topography. Sometimes the climate would be different. Then sometimes um, there are major differences in the site. For example, in one site there are view or a lot of trees or mountains, and the next site the view will be the sea. Then the next site it will be near a fault line or a ridge. So that's why each and every project and undertaking you're going to do is will be unique. Okay, so you cannot build a building without a site, nor should you design one. Okay, so when you design something class, you design a building, you should always make sure that it is designed for the specific context of the site where it would be located. So according here, the site will inform the design of the building. So there are countless ways a site can affect an architectural design. So site analysis should be performed before beginning an architectural design. So these are some of the points stated here uh, about a site that can affect a building design. First, you have the natural elements. Okay? So when you talk about the natural elements, okay, so what are the natural elements within the site? You should look at the, the flora that exists. Okay? Particularly the trees class, it's important that you should consider as much as possible when you build something that should incorporate nature. Okay? Especially that um, our world right now is experiencing a lot of changes in terms of climate. So how can you help as an architect is that when you design a building or structure that takes nature into consideration as well. Okay, then the views, of course, the client would hire an architect, um, not just for regulatory, but also to make sure that when you design, for example, uh, his house, the best view of the area. So, for example, if there are the view of a mountain, there's a beautiful view of the sunset. So these are things that you must capture, okay, in your design. Next is inspiration. Of course, so buildings, less structures. When you design them, inspired from something, okay, that is related design concept. Then the shape and size of the site. Okay, this is one thing that you must also consider. Okay, so when you design, you have really to study and consider how big the site is and what is its shape, the solar orientation. So of course, you should take in the effects of the sunrise, the area with the hottest would be the hottest portion of the building within the day. Okay. So always remember that the sun would always west. Okay. So these are the things that you must your bedrooms. The next is access. Okay. Of course, access is important because you must uh, consider where the road networks would be for your site. Next is topography. Okay. So topography is important class because you have to make sure that where you will locate your build is a good one. Okay. There are certain, for example, there are certain double because if you build there, the construction cost will increase or you're going to do a lot of damage to nature in that area. Then, of course, the weather patterns. So you have to understand the weather of where you're going to place. One of your primary consideration should be is when during the rainy season or during the there are a lot of storms passing. Then, of course, the local regulations. Here in the Philippines, we're talking about the National Building Code, the Fire Code, okay, Structural Code, the Plumbing Code. So there are a lot of codes that we need to know and study. Of course, you encounter them later on as you go through architecture. So because we have a course on our subject on building laws. Then utility access. So you must consider where are the drains, where the electrical systems. In other countries, you have to consider the gas lines. Okay. Then the next, we have here the constraints. So architecture is built in the physical world and has many constraints. So identifying constraints on are critical to building design. So knowing a project's limitations is knowing its potential. So there are many constraints you have on a project. Okay, so these are the common ones. First, you have the zoning codes. Next, like what I've told you earlier, the building codes. Then you have the budget. Of course, always have to remember, class, that when a client hires you to do a project for them, that the budget for that is going to be limited. Okay, so you must make sure that you have maximized the client's budget. Then local labor. Okay, so in the Philippines, you should watch out for labor regulations, which should affect your workers as well. Then, of course, material availability. Okay? So you have to make sure that the materials that you're going to specify for your project is available in the area. Otherwise, if you're going to import materials, it's going to be quite expensive. Then you have a concept. So a concept is, what is the idea? Is there an overriding architectural concept for the building? Okay. So I think what I've observed is that most of you are already good with this one. But when you do a concept class, just don't take things too literal. Okay? So if your concept is, for example, or your inspiration is like a pineapple, you don't have to design your building literally like a pineapple. You just have to interpret it's it's beautiful, and then people can live in it. And goals. So an architect and their client have goals before beginning a project. So there are many different goals for a project, and it should be outlined as early as possible in the process. So for example, an example of a goal for someone building a house would be to design a sustainable house. Another goal for a developer building an apartment building may be to maximize profit. So a school may have a goal to design for improved learning and security. A museum might want to design with a goal for building a creative and innovative work of architecture. A corporate headquarters might have a goal of branding and image. So to in when you are still studying, to successfully identify the goal of the research of the problem that you will be given, I you should research well class the building. Okay. So what to know before beginning an architectural design? So according to the author, he wrote here, as an architect, I studied the process of design development, but these are complicated and quite involved uh, issues. In this article, we reviewed some of the basic concepts with regards to starting an architectural design. So the post is an possible issue condition, but provide a general overview of the topic. Okay, if you want to learn more about actual design process, you have another post explaining the basics of architectural drawings. Okay. So here, class, I think your plan, your elevation, and section, this is something that you're already familiar. Okay, we're going to talk about this in our course. Okay, because these are some of skills that you must not take for granted, especially when you are still building your foundation in architecture. Okay, so when before you start an architectural design class, it is important that you do first the building program. Always remember that and don't forget about it. Okay, because this is a skill that would be useful for you when you reach your higher years. So you have to scientifically solve problem by building a program first before moving into the floor plan. So a lot of students make a mistake in doing their design by jumping into the floor plan right away without first building the program. Okay. So you do the floor plan class, you do the program. Okay. So you must make sure this is one of the ways that you can make sure that the plan that you are doing is functional as well. Okay, so architecture class is not just about building making perspective drawings that are stunning and good, not functional. Okay, so if you want to be you must make a plan that is functional, that is beautiful, and at the same time it makes sense. Okay? So it's not only a work of art, also a science as well. So therefore, architecture is an art and science. You're not just doing sculptures, architecture. So architecture is not just doing something that looks nice. Okay? It has to be usable. I think there's a term for Vitruvius for that, which is uh, uh, Fermitas, Venus, Utilitas. Okay. Utility, function, and beauty. So these are the three things that you must achieve in your design to get a good grade from me this semester. So I expect you class to do well. So just submit if you want to get good grades, submit your plates on time. I'm quite considerate with the submission deadlines, especially now that we're in the pandemic. But I love to give extra points to students who run the extra mile by submitting early. Okay, so if you have any further clarifications and questions, you can reach me anytime. Then we're going to schedule our consultations based on the schedule given by the department. Hey class, so I hope that you're all doing fine. See you next meeting and good luck on the first activity.